got passed. She got passed. It doesn't matter. He's still the winner. However, I get a little annoyed when I hear people say things and call it fact when it's not fact. Thank you.
Well, on that note, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we'll have Steve Davidowitz from grade1racing.com. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Amello, Nick Kling, and we're delighted to be joined by our good friend from out in Las Vegas, Steve Davidowitz. And before I put Steve on the air, ladies and gentlemen, I need to apologize publicly to him and to you. Last week, we had scheduled an interview with Steve, and he was sitting waiting for our call in Las Vegas. And, you know, as I'm getting older in years, I'm suffering from lack of visual acuity, as occasionally I transpose numbers. And I inadvertently transposed the area code, and every time I looked at it, it looked right. And when our staff called Steve, it was a non-working number, and Steve rightfully was left was upset to be left hanging. So Steve, again, I publicly want to apologize to you, and I thank you for accepting the apology, and thank you for giving us the time to join us today.
Well, you're making much more of it than you should, to be honest with you. And the only thing I'm concerned about is when you're looking at numbers on the racing form, I hope you're not transposing 3 to 1 into 1 to 3.
Yeah,
and all the rest of that.
You know.
And I was in Louisville, actually,
right.
So it wasn't as severe a get up in the morning kind of thing as it is today.
Yeah.
And if you're going to apologize for anything, apologize for that.
All right, we apologize for getting you up, but we thank you for joining us. All right, Steve, first of all, you were with us this summer at Saratoga, and you are launching grade1racing.com. Let's talk about that first. And then I know that you've got all sorts of things you want to talk about between Zenyatta and Life of 10 and the world of the Breeders' Cup. So just update the folks on the status of things at Grade 1 Racing.
Well, there have been a number of things. First of all, when I saw you and we were on the air, I think I had 700 or some number of subscribers that came to the site, which exceeded our expectations even then. We have more than 2,600 now. Mm-hmm. And, it's blown me away, to be honest with you. I mean, I never thought that we would reach that many people that quickly. We've made improvements. And one thing we've done, we've made some kind of an improvement or addition or changed something every day since we were open since July 24th. We've had suggestions from members. We've had thoughts of our own. We've had consults with technical support people, and we've inched up into better circumstances all the way through. I have to say, and I don't mean this just to be, pumping myself on the back, but I used the information on the site from New York this past Friday to hit the pick six.
Hey.
The $135,000 number. And that's, one of the major reasons why we're doing this. We're doing this so that we can provide players with tools that they can use to play the game better. I honestly didn't do a whole lot better for the Breeders' Cup. I've had 4 days in my career where I was as bad as I was over this Breeders' Cup, and I've had 3 that I would take 10 more, like I've had last weekend, that are among the best days I've ever had at a racetrack. And we can talk about the Breeders' Cup some, but I'm very proud of the site. We're providing workout reports not only now from the major New York and Southern California tracks, but we're doing it from Churchill Downs. We're training an additional clocker who's going to be covering Gulfstream for us during the winter. We have subscription packages now that allow for complete free access to everything, just like it was free from July 24th to the Breeders' Cup. And they're selling pretty well. And we're not leaving the 2600 behind by any means. We are allowing a fairly substantial access to the site, to very many features on the site. We're giving away free race of the day as an example of what we do provide in the workout and the performance notes. And you've had Lauren Stitch on the air, and she's an outstanding pedigree analyst, and she's got reports on about 3,000 horses who made their first start this year, 2-year-olds, first-time turfers, horses like that. The information is really good. It's getting better. The format's good. The way you can move around on the site is strong and getting better. We're going to have more handicapping features on the site. I'm negotiating with the plot boys to have some bias information generated from them in a mutually beneficial kind of like relationship. We're adding 2 other people to help us with more insight into the way horses are running at different tracks. I can stop there because I think if anybody goes to the site and looks for themselves, they can see what it is that we're providing, and they can gain some useful handicapping information, and that's basically what we're about.
Absolutely, Steve. I just want to say that, if folks don't have time to watch races, the trip and performance notes are important, and good workout information is awful tough to come by. So we appreciate that. We encourage folks to log on and check it out. Okay, let's go back to Churchill Downs. What stood out for you? Just take us through your reactions to the whole 2-day affair, and then we'll talk about both the Classic and the Ladies' Classic.
Well, those are the 2 things that stand out the most to me. Of course, you have to throw in Goldakova's, 3rd straight Breeders' Cup Mile, the easiest of her 3, by the way. Even though I thought going in that Gio Ponte would give her a battle, I didn't much like the horse she had beaten, Paco Boy. She'd already beaten him. And when you see horses that repeatedly beat another horse, I don't care what the margin is, Affirmed, Alidar, Goldakova, Paco Boy. It's unwise to expect the reversal. You might get 1 out of 8 or 9 attempts, but it's really unwise to expect that. I thought that the Life at 10 issue was, as I've called it, a scandal obscured by a scuffle. Because
well said.
If it wasn't for that fight that took place in the first Breeders' Cup Winners' Circle, where Castellano cut off Garcia and endangered the whole field, and Burrell was relatively heroic under pressure in the course of that race, and then was so mad afterwards for people saw 1,000 times what on YouTube and on TV, ESPN, this and that. I don't have to describe it; everybody saw it, and that was played over and over and over again. Whereas the incident regarding Life at 10's not being scratched was hardly ever mentioned, and that to me was a rather perplexing situation with so many millions being bet, with the lives of jockeys, with the welfare of a horse, with the history of some high-profile horses not looking right going into the gate, or if we remember Barbaro's case where he broke through the gate and there was a cursory examination there, and who knows if it really had anything to do with his breakdown and the eventual loss of his life. But, it's just too coincidental for it not to have had some issue there. And when you see a horse and you hear a jockey say, I don't think she feels right, and you find out later that the trainer said, I think she's having a reaction to Lasix and she doesn't look right, and Jerry Bailey on the air saying, this horse should be scratched. And the state vet at the gate looks her over and says, go on your way. And all Velasquez does is let her break, throw a cross at her right out of the starting gate to see if she has any response. She doesn't. And he wisely jogged her around the racetrack to keep her alive and healthy. Yet, the players are the ones that take the short end of this stick all the time. And it's just insane to me that there isn't some provision, some way in which even after the fact, never mind the way a horse is being held in the gate accidentally by his tail, assistant starter. When there's so much evidence there ought to even be a way to say, now, wait a minute, all bets are refunded on this horse. And that may seem to be, rainbow in the sky kind of an approach. But racing doesn't have ways in which it does the right thing after a wrong thing is done. You get a disqualification that you find out about that didn't occur, and the bettors are outraged, and they're left hanging. I even think that there ought to be a way to tie some of what I'm saying into the fund that goes wanting at the end of the year for uncashed pari-mutuel tickets and for the breakage that goes automatically to the state. There ought to be some way in which the leaders of the sport sit down and figure out how to compensate wrongful decisions. It's just outrageous what happened there. And then you go from there, and then you see one of these most amazing, memorable races the night later in the Classic, and when Zenyatta's coming out of the gate, and you're wondering if you're looking at another life at 10. In the first, 15, 20 strides that she takes, she doesn't look right. She's not doing something right. And you find out later that it was possibly a clod of dirt that hit her squarely in the face, and Smith saying that, he wished he had brought her closer, but he didn't have much chance to bring her closer. He did the right thing, I think. He let her settle. Mm-hmm. And, I still have a dispute with the result chart and the subsequent past performances that would accompany her last race when they publish her lifetime past performances. They say she's 16 and a half lengths behind after a quarter mile, and that's at the finish line for the first quarter when they go a mile and a quarter. Well, I measure it in a rough kind of way of at least 20. Mm-hmm. And then when she's in mid-stretch at the 8th hole, they have her 2 lengths behind Blame. I think it's more like 3.5. Mm-hmm. Now, these are things that are very technical, but they show the dimensions of how far back she really came and how fast she really ran. And I have one more point to make about that 8th hole thing, which I think is relevant. Smith blamed himself, as I said, inappropriately for not getting him into the race sooner and what have you. I thought he rode a fantastic race. The one place where I would say that the victory versus defeat took place was between the 8th hole and the 16th hole, after he's whipping the hell out of Zenyatta on the left side for several strokes and getting a response. She's closing. He switches to his right hand, which is very unusual in the stretch drive for a jockey to go from his left to his right. And she does level off better. She does surge stronger. She gives you that same kind of response that she had given in the race that she won desperately at Hollywood Park in her previous race. And if you look at the race carefully, you can see that she's closes all of a sudden stronger. I said that, well, gee, if he had only asked her for that switch of the whip to the right hand 2 or 3 strides earlier, she might have caught him. Now, I think the effort took so much out of it, there was no way that she was going to even pass Blame, who was strong and well-ridden and perfectly placed throughout and was a very good horse. And so after the race, when she did not pass Blame really, and Blame held her safe after the gallop out, I knew that she had put every ounce of her energy into that race as best as she could. And the public, appreciated her, and the naysayers and those who labeled her only a synthetic track horse saw it differently. And it has been written many times and stated, I'm sure, many times to you, and you yourselves have probably said it was an extraordinarily gallant performance. But she lost Horse of the Year with it, I think. I think it's fair to say that Blame deserves the Horse of the Year because he won the race on the racetrack. And I liken it to if you're a football team and you're playing, the championship game, and it's not on a neutral site, but it's on the home site of the team you're playing, and they beat you, you can't say simply just because you were on their home track or their home field that you deserve more consideration because it was their ballpark. Blame was on his home field. Blame did have a better trip, but Blame should have a better trip than Zenyatta. But nevertheless, Zenyatta showed a true class or quality, and it was a memorable race that I think everybody who was there or watched it on TV or saw replays will remember a long time, just like they did last year's Classic.
Well, I'll tell you this, Steve. Zenyatta shows up in Maureen Dowd's column today, which is a place I'd never thought I would see a reference to this great race. Nick?
Steve, the only thing that I will add, a couple of things, there's no question about the fact that Blame galloped out strongly and pulled away from her after the wire, but we actually showed, just before you came on, there's a screen shot, a still 2 jumps after the wire where she put her nose in front. Now, again, that has nothing to do with him fairly winning the race, but, it just shows you the monumental effort that she delivered to get as close as she did.
I agree with that, and I didn't want to mention that because it muddied the waters in my mind of what I think Blame deserves relative to that. But I agree. She did actually on the next 2 head bobs, get a little closer and actually get her head down on them. But the point has been made by you and I together in what really happened there. And I just think that it was a memorable race on so many levels. And that the camp, the Zenyatta camp, was terribly let down because they honestly thought they were bringing in another sure winner in their own minds, that she was ready to fire her best race. And I think the first 16th of a mile was a real issue that cost her the race, and it wasn't Smith's fault, like I said, how that happened. It was just, if I can criticize one thing, which I have, and I did before the Classic, and even when she was running in that prep race, I thought running in that mile and 16th prep race was a mistake. I thought that she's not a mile and 16th horse. And the fact that they had some relationship with Hollywood Park that they seemed to have to live by to run her in that race, that's what I'm hearing through the grapevine about the choice of that race. They'd run there before and blah, blah, blah. That made Sheriff have to compensate with the double team of workouts that he set up, to put more into her than she was going to get, even with the fabulous last gasp effort that she put in to win that race, the mile and the 16th. It's not the kind of race you want to use to come off of that and then go a mile and a quarter. Now, she did it the previous year, but she did it on the same track. She didn't have the unfamiliarity of a large field with dirt being kicked back at her. The race at Oaklawn, she showed she handled the dirt, but you never knew. She was in small fields, and there was no kickbacks that she had to deal with. I think that they could have given, even if they lost a race, which is the tough thing. They were preserving her undefeated record.
Right.
But if they had sent her to the Personal Ensign, or if they had sent her to the Beldame, if they had sent her to any race where there was a dirt track and a fairly substantial group of horses, even if they had gotten beat in the race, I think it would have set her up to win the Breeders' Cup Classic a lot better than the choice of that last race.
Steve, as for the Life at 10 incident, it sounds like you and Tom and I and most people are of a like mind here. The bottom line is 2 things. Number one, horse players got hosed, as Randy Moss so aptly put it last Friday night, and it shows you the disconnect between the people who finance this game and the people who manage and adjudicate the game. The people in Kentucky have no clue whatsoever what they're allowing to happen by levying no penalties, including the stewards themselves, the stewards and the vets on track. I'm sure you know our retired steward up here, Dick Hamilton. Dick told me the other day that in his opinion, the trainer, the jockey, and the stewards should be fined the amount of money that was bet on Life at 10 on track. And I think that that's an indictment. Dick, since he's been retired, has scrupulously avoided criticizing other stewards, but in this case it was so egregious that he could not, keep silent.
Well, I would exclude one person from that group that I feel also ought to be addressed by whomever has higher authority than the stewards, the racing commission, or or some other body that sits in judgment, or should the stewards who sit in judgment, and that is jockey John Velasquez. I think he made attempts to draw attention to what was going on with the horse, and I think he honorably handled his assignment when the gates opened. Short of him jumping off the horse and saying, "I'm not going to ride this horse," which happens, but in a Breeders' Cup race, and where he had, asked them to take a look at the horse. What I found disconcerting about the process, and I talked to John Beach in the press box. He was trying to get out of the track right after that race, and myself and 4 or 5 other reporters stopped him to ask him what was going on there. And he said they had no contact with the state vet down there because it's not in their job description and protocol as to how they handle things like that. That they need to be appealed to by the state vet to scratch the horse, rather than the stewards have to call down there and say, "Listen, check this horse out real careful. We just saw on our TV monitors, ESPN, Jerry Bailey, or whoever it was, saying that this horse is not traveling right." They don't have, apparently, the authority, by the way the rules are written in Kentucky, John was saying, to intercede on that level, which I find absolutely amazing. On a negative level, my eyebrows go right through the roof of my head when I hear that. And you're right, of course. I mean, the way things are set up, they're set up so that the last person that's given the proper concern is the horse player who's bet his money. And we're not only talking about $2 bettors, we're talking about guys who bet $20,000, $50,000, were involved in pick sixes up to their nose. And there was a couple $3 million wagered on that horse when you add it all up. And they, I'll give them one issue that is also part of this problem, and that is the pressure to keep the game going comes from television. It comes from their association with television. It comes with, the pressures of, we got a show here and 70,000 people or however many, 50,000, we got a couple million out there watching, and they don't have enough time to really ponder the issue, or a protocol that says when you have something like that, we have to discuss it with the stewards and with the trainer and with the jockey, and we have to have at least a pause of a minute or 90 seconds that's allowable for something like that. Not just, let's wheel the horse in front of the track vet, he looks at it and says, "Okay, go."
That's a good point, Steve. And it goes to the issue of better production, if you will, or a production consideration. Steve, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Wish you continued success with Grade 1 racing, and we'll be talking to you again.
My pleasure, as always, and anytime.
Okay. Take care, Steve. Thank you very much.
We're going to take a commercial break. By the way, did anybody notice Nick's prop? He's wearing the hose that the bettors got. Let's take a commercial break, and we'll be back with Plod Boy Jake.
This portion of the program brought to you by the Teletheater at 711 Central Avenue in Albany. All the fun, all the action, all year round.
Capital OTB, the region's premier horse racing simulcast facility, featuring the country's most prestigious tracks. Visit one of our more than 40 branches, wager at our easy bet locations, or open a Capital Bets account and wager today from the comfort of home. There's plenty of racing excitement for everyone. Your chances are better with Capital OTB.
Thank you for staying with us, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Amello, Nick Kling. We're joined now by our good friend Jake Jacobs. He's part of Racing Flow. And Jake, Steve Davidowitz was just on the line, as I'm sure you heard, because I know you catch us on the internet, and gave out a bit of info about Plod Boys' futures, huh?
The last time I heard him refer to us, he called us the Plow Boys. and Nick, you have a farming background. Is it a plowboy if somebody stands behind a very slow horse? Is that true?
That's kind of it, Jake. But,
at least he went to plod. That was. Listen, before we get started, can I ask, Nick? It looks like you're carrying a baseball bat with you.
No, actually, let me just tell the guys downstairs that Jake is in the background, not in our ear. But you know, Jake, this is a hose. It represents the hosing that bettors got in the Ladies Classic at the Breeders' Cup.
Okay, well, we had a single upgrade in that race. It was life at 10, and we didn't take it well either.
Didn't take it well,
The story's been said. You don't need my opinion. Yeah. That's a horse. I don't care if it's $1 million race or a $5,000 race.
We all got hosed.
Should not be racing.
I tell you, well, we're growing up here. We're working with props. All right, Jake, it's been a while since we've heard from you guys, what with the intervening Breeders' Cup. Bring us up to date with you've got some slides. We'll put them up and bring folks up to date. We'll get to some upgrades and downgrades.
Okay, let's start with track biases.
Yep.
There are a few since we've last spoken that I think your viewers might want to take note of. In New York, Saturday the 30th, the week before the Breeders' Cup, and then Sunday the 7th, the Sunday after the Breeders' Cup, first at Belmont, second at Aqueduct. These were both days that were extremely kind to closers. So we're on the lookout for failed speed horses on the main track who performed on both the 30th and the 7th. Then I thought I'd take you through our figures for Kentucky. It was an interesting week in Kentucky because we found very similar situations, very tough on speed days, the Thursday before the Breeders' Cup and the Sunday after the Breeders' Cup. But both of the Breeders' Cup days, by our figures, came out in the neutral category. Mm-hmm. Pretty fair both days, at least on the main track. So I just thought I'd point that along. And I guess there's one other thing on for those of you who play on the West Coast. Hollywood went through a period of time that was very, very tough on speed. So if you go through your PPs and find speed horses that failed on either the 28th, 29th, probably even the 30th, although it didn't make our threshold, and the 31st especially, those 3 or 4 dates for, I don't know what the track maintenance schedule was out there, but you did not want to be anywhere near the lead in those races. So if you find failed horses who were racing on the lead in those, I think you can find yourself an overlay or two.
All right, and I would encourage our members of our audience, we've got, Jake sends us a slide. You should have a pen or a pencil. I should have said this beforehand. You can write down those dates. Let's go to the next slide.
Let's take a look at the most extreme races from last week. 3 of them come out of Churchill Downs on the Thursday before Breeders' Cup. The race is won by Constabulary, Anthony's Cross, and I won't even try to pronounce Blitzen's Kissin' Pig, I believe it is. I'm not quite sure. But